Happy Thursday. Sorry for yesterday, some late scheduling problems, but we are back and we have some news to talk about. But we're going to start with the pre-show. And I know everybody's getting geared up for the NFL season. It's going to be Russ versus Mike in week 1, Jets versus Bills. We have bragging rights on the
one of my favorite matchups in football. Jets, Bills, Jets, Dolphins. Those are my two favorite. Patriots really weren't a big rival for the Jets for a very long time till all the Belichick stuff, and then they quickly jetted to the top. But really, in me, the way growing up, it was Bills and Dolphins, honestly.
Well, the funny thing was Bills and Dolphins for until I was 13 years old was completely one-sided because the Dolphins always beat the Bills. They lost. I don't think they won a game in the 70s against the Dolphins. The Bills did. And then I was actually at the first game that the Bills beat. It was 80 or 81. I think it was 80. They won 17-7 at Rich Stadium, and they pulled the goalpost down. The fans jumped onto and yanked the goalpost down. Joe Ferguson threw a touchdown to Roosevelt Leaks.
I remember him.
Yes, former Baltimore Colt. But yeah, no, and I mean, New England New England sucked for a lot of those years. So
Sam Bam Cunningham, they weren't very good.
Well, in the 70s, they had Grogan and Sam Bam Cunningham and Russ Francis at tight end.
Francis was great.
They were good. Then they had the Bledsoe era when they made a Super Bowl in '85. But most of the time, they were crap, and it was like Flutie was a quarterback for a bad Patriots.
Although Grogan once on Monday Night Football beat the Jets 56-3, but that was like the game of his life.
But and the Jet, it's weird because it always seems the Bills, no matter how good or bad the Bills are or the Jets are, they always split.
Yeah, they always split. There have been a couple of weird years where somebody's won too, but it's very rare. They usually split. You could look at the rosters and you can see a big difference sometimes between the two teams. And then these games, like even in the 81 playoff game where it looks like the Jets are getting destroyed in the first half, in the second half, they almost come back and win. A lot of those games are like that.
And I'm pretty sure, Russ, the only time they've met in the playoffs was that famous one. I'm not bringing it up just to rip.
No, I know. I think you're right.
I don't think they met in the AFL playoffs. I think that was the only time they played the Jets.
All right, so in other news. Remember how Tom Brady lost his trademark lawsuit to Tom Seaver? I think the WWE is about to lose a trademark lawsuit to Ric Flair. So Becky Lynch came up with this angle, or the WWE did, or somebody, but I was watching a show where I think she said she did, where she was called the man. Okay. So that's her angle, even though she's a woman. And so one of her big first matches for a title was against Charlotte Flair, Ric's daughter.
Right.
So it was the man against Ric Flair's daughter. So Ric Flair was on TMZ yesterday. Of course, they grab him at the airport, which is always the best place to grab everybody when you want to interview him. And he basically talked about his beef with the WWE because he said that he had texted Hunter Hearst Helmsley after he spoke to this lawyer who really doesn't care about Ric Flair and says that to be the man, to beat the man, you have to be the man is what he has trademarked.
Sure.
And basically the WWE lawyer's no, it's not even close. And then Rick gets mad. And then he's telling Helmsley, if you don't do something about it, because he checked out his royalty statement and I guess he didn't like what he saw. And so then he's like, you're going to get sued on this. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to file for that trademark because the way Ric Flair said it in his video, the WWE actually doesn't own the trademark on that. And so I think what's going to happen is the same thing that happened in the Seaver case. Nobody owned the trademark, right? But the way a trademark works is whoever's closely identified with the phrase is the one who, even if he doesn't ever file for it, technically would be the only person who could file for it until they die. So like with Seaver, they said, hey, we rule against Tom Brady. It is Tom Seaver's whether he ever files for it or not. And Seaver probably will never file for it. And you got to believe with Ric Flair, he is going to win that because he's been saying that since the 80s in his catchphrase.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and the WWE does lose sometimes. Remember, they were the WWF.
Yes,
So,
I still slip up on that. I still say WWF.
Well, the World Wildlife Fund, right? I mean, they're the ones. I mean, it was unbelievable when the lawsuit happened, but you could see why they were upset because, like, that was their trademark, right? And so they won, and the WWE became the WWE. Yeah, it was the WWF for a while. You remember that?
That's right. But back in the WR, even before the WR days.
That was when Vince Sr. was the.
Yeah. So they dropped one W, and that's when they ran into problems.
Correct.
Okay. Changing from the sublime to the ridiculous, and I'm calling Antonio Brown ridiculous. This guy's an idiot. He really, truly is an idiot. And I thought that this whole thing over the 4 weeks of the preseason with him in the helmet, and then the frostbitten feet was all a contrivance to keep him out of preseason games. That he wanted.
We both thought that early on.
Yeah,
I think we were right.
But now it's plainly been revealed that he's an idiot because he goes on social media after he being fined by the Raiders. I think it was $55,000. Mm-hmm. Posts the notice from the Raiders on Instagram. He talks some trash about, he
used the word the devil or something like that, which was nutty.
I mean, I'm sorry. Do you realize you're getting paid $30 million by them?
Right. You could tell by week 2 of Hard Knocks. And again, let's talk about Hard Knocks for a minute. While it's still enjoyable, they made it the John Gruden soundbite show, and it was terrible the way they ended it. I just want to say that. Like, it's just, there's more to a team than John Gruden's sound bites, and going back and talking about all the times that John Gruden was on there and saying, it's like, nobody cares about that. Now, I always care about the guys who get cut, and I always will, feel bad for them and follow them. And there was a guy from New Jersey, and he ended up going to Detroit, and I don't know if he made the team on Detroit, but whatever. I always care about that. I'm invested in that. I'm not invested in John Gruden because, for one thing, I don't think he's a good coach. I think John Gruden's a backslapper who understands plays, and just because of that, rose to prominence. I don't think he's a great coach. But anyhow, getting back to the Brown portion of it, I don't need to see him working out. I don't need to see his kids wearing the helmet that he says he finally decided on. Like, all of a sudden he came down from a mountaintop to decide on a goddamn helmet for a football game. Like, it's just, all of it was maddening. He never played in a game. I don't even think he played in the scrimmage when, another team came over and scrimmaged with him. Like, he didn't do much other than a few practices with the team and whatever workouts while he was there. And for him to miss, considering he wasn't doing anything anyhow, I don't blame the Raiders. I think the Raiders are in the right, and I could see a situation where if this escalates, the Raiders are going to do a lot more than what they've done to him.
Well, and I saw this, and we'll get off of this and start the show. I saw this on Twitter from Spot Track, and it's interesting if they go down this road. Apparently, there are clauses in the contract with most teams with players where if there's conduct detrimental to the organization, that they can unguarantee the guaranteed portions of the contract. And we're talking sizable, like 14, 15 million bucks a year. And if that's the case, if the Raiders want to, it's perfectly possible that the Raiders may soon look to void the guarantees in Brown's contracts for 2019 and 20, 14.6 and 14.5 million based on various incidents of conduct detrimental to the team. They really hold the whip hand here, honestly.
They do. I mean, again, I don't know what he thinks he is. And yes, is he a talented receiver? Sure. But at the end of the day, people in Pittsburgh are rejoicing the fact that he is doing all this and they got out from under with him.
I have to give somebody some plaudits on in our YouTube comments. Somebody has taken the name Mike's Gray Shirt. I'll answer for Mike as he left me in the dresser today. That's great. I love that.
That's fantastic.
Okay. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, September 5th, 2019.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Red Shirt Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on Hockey Buzz.
Although it doesn't look red, it looks more like a wine.
It's maroon. It's I don't know.
It's like a burgundy wine. Yeah.
There you go. I'll go drink some wine, and if I spill it, I can't tell the difference. Okay, we're going to start with some contract talk, and we're going to lead into the most notable contract that was signed yesterday, and do our preview, continue our team previews, because the player that signed the 8-year extension is the leading scorer of the Arizona Coyotes, and that would be Clayton Keller. Now, it was announced yesterday, Keller signed an 8-year max for $7.15 million a year. I've heard some criticism and some complimenting on John Chayka's signing of Keller to this contract. Now, he's 1 year away from his RFA, his entry-level deal expiring. Right. So they get it done ahead of time. His rookie year, he had 65 points. Last year, the Coyotes had trouble scoring. He still led the team in scoring, but with 47 points, only 14 goals. This locks him up until age 29.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with this. I think he's a good player. I know that some of the analytics crowd was out there and saying, "Well, his numbers aren't great." He's a good player. I mean, what the hell more do you need?
I think he's better than a good player, and I think that with the right talent, you could see him get around that 65, 70 point mark again and more goals. He's not a goal scorer. He's a pass first guy. And with someone like Kessel, I think you could see his assists rise if that's who they decide to put him with. This is a great signing. And I'll give you a couple reasons why. And you don't even have to look at analytics. And there's positives here, a lot of them. So for one thing, last 2 years, he's averaging over 18 minutes of ice time. Mm-hmm. For a forward, that's a really good amount of ice time for a 21-year-old. Let's say that. You take away that 18 minutes of his scoring each season, and you would be hard-pressed to replace it. He's had, in the last 2 years, 30 even-strength goals out of his 37. Now, that's really good. I mean, you think about the value of even-strength goal. So he's getting mostly assists on the power play, and so assist-wise, he has 33 assists out of his 77 on the power play. So he still has 40-something even strength. So this guy's performing at even strength. That is something where I think that has to come into play. Now, here's the one where you could look at plus minus, but that is a team stat. It is absolutely a team statistic. But if you want to look career, he has 89, and again, it got a lot better last year, 89 takeaways to 87 giveaways. Last year, 46 takeaways to 37 giveaways. To me, for an offensive player, a guy who's just 21 and is clearly going to get better as they surround him with more talent, this is a bargain. Anybody who thinks they overpaid for Clayton Keller is out of their mind.
Now, Peter, we're talking about Keller.
Right here.
You're out of your mind.
Go ahead.
So one good year of 65 points, and then a downward year is now worth $7.15 million. What
Okay.
if you're wrong? So here's the thing. To quote you, Russ.
Yeah.
If Arizona has way more ability to be wrong than someone else does. That's why this makes sense. It's not that.
Okay.
It's not that it's necessarily a bad deal in that they have the ability to be wrong because they're never going to spend anywhere else. So 2 large deals on them and stuff, it's not going to kill them. If this is the Jets doing that and they were wrong,
sure,
they're cooked.
Sure.
And that's the position they're in. So they can be wrong and it won't cripple them because they've got nothing else.
Right. And this is another page in the chat and the Chayka playbook, because over the last 12 or so months, he has signed Keller 7.15 years. Christian Dvorak, he signed to a 7-year extension, and he got nothing out of the first year of that extension because he was hurt for most of the year at 4.45. Nick Schmaltz, after he got hurt, signed him to a 7-year extension at 5.85. He extended Chychrun while he was injured. He extended Oliver Ekman-Larsson. So he's giving them term, but he's getting deals in terms of the amount that he's paying them, because Keller, this is the thing. And Russ pointed out, Keller, if they put him with Kessel, he could have a 70, 75 point season. If that happens, and this is maybe Chaika learning the lesson of, teams like Calgary or Toronto or Winnipeg, if he goes out and scores 75 points, then it's not going to be 7.15 million. It's probably going to be 8.5 to 10 to 9 million.
So I'm not saying, let me be really clear. I'm not saying Keller's a bad player, but he's not everything people think he is. He's not a play driver.
Oh, I don't know about that. See,
the metrics say otherwise.
Yeah, but who has he had on his line? That's what you have to ask.
No. I agree with that. Russ, this is why I was going to say this is a hedge. That's what this contract is. It's a hedge. And with every hedge is a gamble.
Yes.
Right now, we're not sure what Clayton Keller projects to be. There's a great line that could go up and be amazing, but it could also plateau at a certain point. This is the hedge that Chaika is betting. He's going to be above that. Now, his job is he's got to get the pieces in place to make sure he gets the value back.
Yeah.
That's what I think everyone should be a little nervous about.
Well, again, I don't know what stat you heard me say, Peter. His even strength goals, his even strength assists, his giveaways to takeaways, and he hasn't missed a game in 2 years. He's played 82 and 82. Like, these are all in 18 minutes a game. So, you know what? I believe he will be that. I think if anybody saw him play with the under-18s, who literally had the record for points until Jack Hughes broke it this year, I think you need to see better players with Clayton Keller. Yeah. And I think once you see that, you'll see the points go back up.
See, this
and that's Chaika's hedge, right?
Right. And this is the thing, Peter. If it turns out well, if Keller progresses and does what Chaika thinks and what Russ thinks he can do, then this is the best value contract next to Nathan MacKinnon in the league. If he scores 75, 80 points and he realizes that, McKinnon's making 6.3, and it's a complete joke because there are players making over 6.5 million who are not even close to being as good a player as Nathan MacKinnon is. Keller has the ability to make that contract be a very good value. And the same thing with Dvorak. I mean, if Dvorak comes back healthy and is a 55 point player, making 4.45 million is nothing in this league now.
Yeah.
So that is the gamble, but I mean, I think it's a good gamble for Chaika.
I do too.
Well, okay. It's a gamble he almost has to make.
Right.
What I was trying to get at yesterday is there's probably a few there's a few GMs who are like, damn, now I've got a benchmark of something I probably didn't want to benchmark against.
Sure, I get that.
And that's the issue here. Like, honestly, like, from a lockup and standpoint of owning the player, it's a good move. I think it's too high. Is Clayton Keller Nylander?
I think
that's essentially who the latest model you're comparing him against.
You want to put him with Austin Matthews, you'll see Clayton Keller score 80 points.
How often did Nylander play with Matthews, though?
Well, the first year he played a lot, right, Mike?
Nylander played mostly, I would say, the second half of the first year and then all of the second year.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to wait 5 years for Matthews to get to Arizona then. Oh!
Now, well, let's ask this question though. Avoiding that missive by Mr. Tessier. How is this, if any, going to affect the RFA class that's currently out there? Or I know that Matthew Barzal was asked regarding his contract at the end of this season at the NHL media event, and he didn't really want to talk that much about it. But the Islanders are in a similar situation where they have cap space, and he's probably their best young player. And I'm sure Lou's probably ecstatic at the benchmark of $7 million for Barzal. I think Barzal is going to ask for a lot more.
Oh yeah,
but. Does this affect the asking price for the guys like Tkachuk or Point or Marner or Grantanen or any of these guys?
I think it affects all of them to some degree because everybody can get their agent to point at something. Like you can get Konechny's agents to say, look, Konechny's got more goals than this guy. He may not have as many points because of that 65-point years, but he's more consistent with goals. Like they could all pay out a little something here and all take a little raise out of it. I don't doubt that that's going to happen.
Well, the funny thing is, Peter, is that Keller has gone against the grain here because all of these young guys apparently want 3, 4, 5-year deals so they can hit it big in unrestricted free agency at age 26, 27, get another big deal. Keller here has locked himself up basically through his prime, and maybe he did it because it's Arizona and he likes living there, and eventually they'll be a good team. But it does go against the grain because everybody, Connor and Line A, it's Marner, it all seems that they're all wanting to bet on themselves and go short term.
Yeah. Sorry, I just got a text message from my wife. Sorry.
Oh no.
Sorry, they're all going for term. So
they're all going short term. Yeah. Whereas Keller went 8, and that's unusual because most of these guys want to go 3, 4, 5 to hit it big.
Well, that's the current trend, right? But if you look back at someone else who have significant sort of numbers and scenarios, Scheifele went 8, Ehlers went 7. I'm just talking Jet stuff here, but so now you're seeing the shorter terms. I think partially because when those deals were signed, we didn't have the known entity of Seattle in the expansion draft, and we didn't have the current state of understanding where a lockout pressure might be. Right. So I think recent events have changed a few things in how GMs and agents look at stuff. And also teams are finding ways to weaponize resources in terms of large signing bonuses, such as the Leafs have done with cash flow and stuff. And we know for a fact that the Arizona Coyotes do not have the Leafs cash flow. Like that's just a given. So you see different scenarios based on different teams and how they're using their assets to pay players and stuff. And I think that's more of it. Like why he went 8, security, probably partially because he still has 1 year left on his entry level deal. And frankly, if someone is going to throw $56 million at me, I'd just take it over 8 years too, because it's guaranteed money anyways. Well, I wouldn't even worry about the rest of it.
There's a couple ways you can look at this. I think with new ownership, they're going to look to do that with certain players because they kind of have to, right?
Sure.
Arizona can't afford to renegotiate with someone in 3 years. They're not the Leafs. They're not a big organization. So that's one. The other thing is,
bless you.
As we saw with Ilya Kovalchuk or anybody else that was with a franchise that got it, moved or taken over, that contract just carries over. So like Peter said, you might as well just get paid now because maybe you'll be playing in Arizona, maybe you won't. Yeah. But you'll still be getting paid in that new place no matter what.
Yeah.
Okay, now we'll just briefly touch on the Coyotes in general here as our team previews continue. And, I mean, the Coyotes surprisingly stayed in the race till the last, I would say, 7 to 10 days. I mean, they finished with a record of 39, 35, and 8, which is 86 points. And that's, for a team that was devastated by injuries and didn't score a ton of points, that's pretty good. Keller was their leading scorer with 47 points. Their leading goal, they did not have a 20-goal scorer. Their number one goaltender, Antti Ranta, was hurt early on and didn't play for most of the season, and they went with Darcy Kemper for 55 games and still stayed in the race, which is, I think, is a testament to Rick Tockett's ability.
Yeah, this is a well-coached year by Rick Tocchet. That's what it was.
Let me just lay this out, and then I'll let you guys go. Now they've added Kessel in the trade. They traded Galchenyuk in a deal for Kessel. They acquired Schmaltz last year. He got hurt, but he'll be healthy. They brought in Carl Soderberg from Colorado, basically as a salary dump. We would think that Dvorak is going to be back healthy. And defensively, they bring back the 3 veterans: Ekman Larson, Goligoski, Yarmulson. Chikrin, now is a year away from the injuries that he had. I think this team has the ability to improve. I don't know if they have the ability to get into the top 3 in the Pacific, and that's the thing. I don't think the wild card there's going to be a wild card coming out of the Pacific Division. I think it's going to be the top 3, and the 2 wild cards coming out of the Central, because the Central was so deep, talented. So, do I think Arizona can get into the top 3? No, but do I think they'll be improved? Yes. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, they've added Kessel. A healthy Rantanen could help them because he was playing well prior to injury, and they're not. I mean, other than Kessel, Richardson, and Grabner. Well, actually, they've got Goligoski and Harlson. They're a relatively young team. Well, then there's Demers too, but they're look. This is why I always say it's a hedge with what they did with Keller, because if the things work out, and if you're a GM, you have to believe things are going to work out, or why do anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to assume your plan is going to unfold with a more likely chance of working than not. Otherwise, you shouldn't be in the business. Then there's potential here to make some noise. And let's not forget, like in 2010, I know it's 9 years ago, different team, different issues. Again, not with the same kind of resources. They made a very decent run in the playoffs. And this is the kind of thing that, all these little pieces in there could be really interesting. I mean, what's Phil Kessel going to be like in a market without scrutiny? It could just play right into his wheelhouse.
Sure.
The guy still has, as much as I've been critical about Phil Kessel, Mike, you were the one to say him. He's this bizarre hockey savant when it comes to his appearance and condition and stuff. He's totally exceeded all expectations I've had for him as he's aged. And there is a base of talent there.
Mm-hmm.
Just will Tocchet be able to pull it all together and take one more step? I agree with you. If there is a chance of getting into the playoffs, they come in as a wild card out of nowhere, but they hung around last year. They could do it again. That's all they have to do is hang around and get hot, get that streak going at the right time.
I mean, Russ, injuries have killed this team over the last couple of years. And the one thing, Kessel has played every game since I think 2010 when he separated his shoulder with the Bruins, and then he was out for the first couple, I think it was month and a half with the Leafs, and then he's played every game since. So he's durable. The only thing I think, I continue to think the reason that Pittsburgh traded him is because they were worried that going into his 30s that the lack of physical training was going to take its toll in terms of him losing speed. And once he loses speed, then, I think his game is going to decline. But as long as he's still there and as long as he's in decent enough shape and we know his abilities are through the roof, I mean, if they put him with Keller, that could be a dynamic combo.
Could be. I mean, you're looking for Dvorak to come back strong.
Yep.
Somebody like Nick Cousins, who's like $1 million player, Barrett Hayton could walk in and take his job.
Yes.
And maybe Cousins becomes that role player or something else. But I expect I spoke to Barrett Hayton and watched a lot of him at the rookie showcase, and I think he's ready enough that if they put him into an NHL position, he can play the part. I don't think he'll ever be a superstar, but I think he's well-rounded enough in his all-around game that he could do that. Oh, Nick Cousins went to Montreal. I forgot about that. But it's fine. They have Hayton too, and I think that's another big add. I do think their defense is much better. Chychrun will continue to improve.
Yeah.
I think their goaltending is an issue, and we'll see how that plays out because, again, they're one of those teams that has to have 50-something good starts out of a goalie if they want to make a playoffs.
Yeah, I think they need an advance out of Lawson Krause and guys like Fisher.
Yeah, I mean, those are 10, 12 goal guys, which is fine. But they can give you physical play and they can burn up some important minutes. I think that's a key thing. I do think Keller can get more points, and I know he will. So I don't even worry about Clayton Keller in this situation. Connor Garland was a big surprise for them last year, who always had offensive ability. If he can get somewhere near what he did last year, that's pretty nice. It really does boil down to the goaltending. It does, because you want Raanta in there. I think that's the ultimate thing. I think Raanta has to play 50-something games for them to do right.
And I think they need Schmaltz to be healthy. And once he got traded from the Hawks, he almost scored a point per game before he got hurt. So they need for him to continue.
He's a talented player next
Yeah, so he and him and Stepan up the middle. That's not bad.
Stepan, Hayton, you're talking. That's
there's potential there. So we'll follow them.
I think it's a little more potential than we've talked about the last few years because adding Kessel is a big deal. You've probably added 30 goals, and nowadays that's hard to do.
Now, a lot of contract news over the last couple of days. The other one that was fairly prominent was Adrian Kempe signing a 3-year, $6 million deal with the LA Kings.
A bargain.
I like Kempe as a player. He sort of broke out a little bit last year. He got a little bit more of an opportunity. 28 points in 81 games. That was. It was a little bit down from his first full year, but I think the Kings took advantage of that because I think he'll bounce back. He's got a lot of talent. So, this is a smart move for a team that is spending a lot of bad money on a lot of players who are past their prime.
Yeah, I think this is a smart move because, you're talking about a 22-year-old, a guy who's getting stronger every year. He's 6'2". He's over probably about 200 pounds now. 28 points. I think he's scratching the surface. I don't think he gets over 50, but I think you could see in the 40s, especially with more opportunity this year, which, again, on a rebuilding team he will get. He adds a little toughness. Mm-hmm. He has that warrior mentality that he likes to go out there on the ice with. I love it. I think this is a smart move, and I think it's smart. He could become similar to Wayne Simmons for them. And I think over time, that's what you're looking at, that kind of role.
Yeah, and they brought in his brother, Marleau.
Marleau, he's kicked
he's a borderline NHLer, but I don't think they would have done that if they didn't see you know what I'm saying? It's sort of like the Jordy Ben, Jamie Benn thing where they bring in the brother as a support structure or whatever. And if they weren't interested in making a long-term commitment to Kempe, I don't think they would have done that.
Oh, I'll tell you, the brother situation is tricky because I was brought in for a preseason game for my brother's deck hockey team, and I think I scored 4 goals. And my brother promptly kicked me off the team because he didn't like the fact that I was better than him. So that's where the brother situation sometimes doesn't work out.
All right. Peter, if you don't, do you have any thoughts on Kempe? Or I think it's a good value signing.
That's fine. Yeah, I agree with you, Russ. I'm in.
Okay. Now, the interesting news yesterday was not about a player that agreed to a contract, but a player that apparently is not going to get a contract from the team that we assumed that he was going to get one from, and that was Patrick Marleau with the San Jose Sharks. It was announced yesterday that Marleau and the Sharks will not happen. Marleau was practicing at the Sharks practice facility in Northern California wearing his Leafs garb. Everybody else was wearing teal. And but he's not, the Sharks do not have any interest in Marleau. Now I'm wondering whether that's going to have any effect on Joe Thornton, whether they're moving on from him as well, but I haven't heard anything on that score. But Marleau apparently still wants to play. And I put it out a question to Leaf fans out there. Would you be interested in Marleau on a league minimum deal, sort of like what happened with Brooks Orpik last year, where they traded him to Colorado, they bought him out, and then they re-signed him. And I looked at the poll last night, and it wasn't sizably in the negative, but there were more no's than yeses. I'll have to check on the final results. But Peter, do you think there's anybody who's interested in Patrick Marleau for a year?
Maybe. A team who should be interested in him but won't be is the Canucks. Yeah. He won't go to Edmonton unless Jim Holland's got some magic sort of soothsaying words to get him to come into that disaster. I mean, they could use him just to help Connor McDavid manage some of the things that are going on, but so could the Canucks. And in fact, I think the Canucks are a better, well-rounded team that you could shelter him. In Edmonton, you might be playing second line minutes automatically, right? Like that's not the right idea. But for a team like the Canucks, he could provide some stability in there, considering the recent comments about maybe turning Louis Eriksson into a third line checker. Like, I mean, from Benning, I mean, you still wonder what's going on.
Furthest away from a third line checker that I've ever seen.
Yeah. You should just frame that quote, Russ, and send it to Jim Benning. Like, exactly. And I think there's a team that could use. It's one of those things where you'd have to have sheltered minutes, preferred zone starts, but you'd love having his breadth of experience and knowledge in that room, because there is value to that still. And that is the one thing that sucks about the NHL, is that you can't have guys like that on your roster because cap space and roster spots are so limited. It's almost like every team should have one capped exempt player that signs under, say, $4 million or less, and they're not included on the cap. And you can bring in a Marleau and pay him for all those things he knows, not because he's going to be flying down the ice.
Look, Marleau can still help teams. Obviously, he still can skate. He's going to score 15 goals. He will give you some good minutes, power play minutes. He is smart. He doesn't kill you out there. Yeah. I think the Canadians, I think the Islanders, I think the Flyers, especially if they feel like they're having a hard time with Konechny. I feel like I think the Rangers, if they didn't load up so much, probably would have, because the Rangers had interest in Marleau initially. I think there's probably, the Penguins might. I think there's at least 4 or 5 teams that he'll have his choice of. I do.
Yeah, and the final on the poll was 54% no, 46%.
He won't take the minimum either. He's not gonna.
Well, and that's the thing. If he won't take minimum, I think that's going to knock it down severely. I mean, they're the teams that are going to be willing to give him a couple $1 million a year. Remember, he got the payoff from the buyout. So
no, I get it. Like I think he'll ask for $2 million, and he'll have bonuses in there to sort of, be the carrot. And, right now, the fact that he scored 16 last year, that's the worst year he's had.
Right.
Really, ever.
Rookie year.
So what if he could actually even do a little better than that in the right situation, which I think there's still an argument that he could.
The funny thing is, Russ, I think right now the Leafs could use him still.
Yeah.
Because Zach Hyman's going to be out till November, and they're probably going to be playing a guy who has never played left wing professionally in Ilya Mikheyev, the KHL player, who's switching over from the right side to the left. He's a left shot, but I think they could use him, and especially if Marner is going to be an extent. I'm not saying that Marleau is going to make up for what Marner does, but he's a veteran player and he could fit in. But it would all be contingent on him taking a league minimum deal, and I don't think he's going to do that. You're probably right. So
look, I think it's like September 25th, and I still have RFA holdouts. If I'm Chuck Fletcher, I'm calling him. If I'm over in Calgary, I think I'm calling him. If Kachuk is still a holdout.
Yeah. What if you're the Winnipeg Jets, Peter? What if you've got Laine and Connor out, and you can get Marleau for $750,000, $800,000 a year?
I think you do it, but you only do it if you know you're going to give him time if someone comes back. Like if you that's the thing. Like you've got to give Patrick Marleau your word that wait a sec.
Right.
Hey, this guy comes back in 2 months.
Right.
You're still playing. We're not going to just hide you in the press box, because that's not the right way to do this.
And
frankly,
playing is going to be a motivation for him because he's got that consecutive game streak. He wants to keep that going.
Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of the big thing, right? Like you've got to honor, like when you bring him in, you've sort of got to honor who he is and what he's done. That's part of this. And there's a lot of teams who shouldn't do that at all. And there's some who maybe can, and there's some who won't. And that's the hard part here. But, I don't think – I'll tell you why I don't think the Jets would. Because Marleau is going to bring a level of leadership and expertise that there might already be some conflicts within Winnipeg about.
Okay.
And if some of the rumors that Mike McIntyre put up, Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press, not just a blogger like me, but a guy who literally blew the doors open on potential strife in that room and some of the issues, but never furthered the details. If they're right, and you bring Marleau in, what does that say to Blake Wheeler? You know, are you saying you need help or you're not doing it right? We need a Marleau in here to help manage this so you can learn. Well, Blake Wheeler's turning 32. Like, you know, he is what he is. He's not going to change now.
Right.
So, you know,
you don't really need him to change anyhow. He's a really good player. Like, you're not.
Yeah. No, I mean, not change the game, but change how you lead as the captain. And
yeah, I mean, he's not going to do that.
No, he's not going to do that, is he?
He's not going to step on any toes. He really, like in Toronto, he realized his role. He was there to sort of educate Matthews and Marner on how to be good pros. He took them under his wing. You know, they basically became his de facto children.
Yeah.
And I think he's had a positive effect on them. And he was a leader in the locker room, but not like I don't think he was a rah-rah vocal guy. He's just a class individual. Yeah. And I think that he would help any team. And even a team that has some sort of leadership issues, he probably would come in and just be a support guy. But I think that for him, the most important thing would be to play. And if he's going to be like a spare part, then it's not worth his time. And if it's, you know, because his family's in Northern California, I think he hoped that he was going to play with the Sharks. Didn't work out. Now, you know, I don't think any of the teams in California are within a striking distance of winning a Stanley Cup in the next couple of years, except for San Jose.
No.
So, there were some rumors about Arizona. There were some rumors about Edmonton. I don't know. Like, I mean,
one more surprise team.
Okay.
Maybe the St. Louis Blues.
Okay. Not, Colorado could work.
If you're thinking just out of realms of possibility, why not?
Right.
Absolutely. I think part of what Marleau's issue is that he's got to be in a place that's maybe conducive to his family being accessible and stuff. That's why I think the West Coast works, because his family's back in San Jose.
Right.
His wife and kids, you know, making a jump up to Vancouver isn't too hard. Making a jump to St. Louis might not be that hard either.
No, I think that's a good location.
What about Colorado?
That's what I said. Colorado makes sense.
Did you say? Oh, sorry, Mike.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense because they have a lot of young players, and I think the value of Marleau more than just him on the ice is off the ice and in the locker room. The Leafs saw that. The one criticism about like my theory about them bringing him back to Toronto would be Babcock will still want to play him too much.
Yes, that's definite. Especially early in the season with Marner out, he'll play him to death.
Yeah. Now, just touching on a couple Leaf-related things, and we'll talk about a few other things and take some questions before we end the show. And Russ on cue leaves. The general talk about Marner that's come out from insiders like Elliot Friedman and Pierre LeBrun is that it's starting to go in the direction of a bridge deal, which I said 3 months ago. I thought the compromise was the bridge, and that would be where I think both sides could agree, but it was all dependent on what it would cost on a bridge. In a 3-year deal is what has been mentioned. But the amount that's being floated, and it has to be from the Marner camp, is over $9 million on a 3-year deal. That's double what Kucherov got 3 years ago. I would be shocked if the Leafs, if they sign him to a 3-year bridge deal and get little or no security. The only security they get is that he doesn't walk to UFA. I would be shocked if they go over $9 million on a 3-year deal. If you're talking 8.5, I think that's bad, but it's not as bad as going over 9 because you're setting a date. The league general managers will hate Kyle Dubas if he does that because he sets a whole new precedent, Peter. And I think that they'll say, what the hell's going on? And he won't care because he just wants to get the player in. But that will open up a whole new can of worms for a lot of teams.
Yeah. Absolutely. It'll open up a huge can. But they're all in this situation because they've sat around and waited for whatever reasons, right? And now, I mean, the first little crack of the can was the Keller deal, and now teams are going to have to play around that. You've heard me say it for years. I'd rather set the market than have the market be set for me.
Right.
And I think there's an ability, there's a reason GMs need to be a little more aggressive on things like this, because you don't want someone else setting the value.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the, contracts that are out there, you can see that agents have some leverage based on who's given someone what. And, if Marner does 3 years at $9 million or in around that range, that's going to create chaos for Joe Sakic and Kevin Cheveldayoff if they haven't cleaned up their house.
And a lot of people, Russ, believe that. I mean, at least I believe that the $9 million AAV that on this is coming from Marner's side, because I don't think the Leafs are not, they're. I could see them saying, 3-year deal, 7.5, 8, 8.5. Okay, it's you have to sort of plug your nose because it's precedent setting, but we'll do it just to get him in there. And Dubas, in an interview with Bob McKenzie a couple days ago, was like, was basically open to anything in terms of term. He said, well, I'm not going to limit myself in terms of term. We would like 6 or 7 or 8 years, but if it's a short-term deal, we can work with that. I think he's just looking for Marner's side to work with him, and it just seems like the Leafs are doing all the giving here, and there's no.
Yeah, because they've talked about term to death. At this point, like it's probably a dead subject.
Right.
Of course. I mean, you just gave every possible scenario. Like, they haven't talked about that already. Like, you know what I mean? It's just it's ridiculous. I kind of wonder now if any of them are going to sign before September 15th. That's what I kind of wonder now, because now the PA is sort of waiting on, even though they had a meeting yesterday, waiting to give the NHL their answer as to lockout early or no lockout early. And so I kind of wonder now, are players going to even sign before that? I wonder. And
you anticipated what I was going to bring up next, because, Peter, there has been some indication of optimism on the CBA front, because first the NHL decided that they weren't going to opt out. That was pretty much, we knew that a few months ago. There seems to be some pleasant talk and positive talk from Donald Fehr about discussions ongoing and a good dialogue. It doesn't mean that on September the 15th they don't agree to opt out, and if they agree to opt out, then the clock is ticking. Now, I've heard guys like LeBrun and Mike Zeisberger, who were in Chicago where the players are meeting, saying that there is the direction is going positively towards either being an extension of the current CBA or to 3 or 4 years, just to keep labor peace. And I think both sides are interested in that, but I think that there are going to have to be concessions on both sides. And I don't think the concessions that are going to be necessary are going to force a lockout, but I don't think it's going to be solved simply by the players saying, "Oh, we're good for the next 2 years." I think they're going
to solve it right now. All they're saying is, don't do it early.
Right, but Russ, I think that they're going to opt out because they want, because they want to address the problems in the current CBA sooner rather than later. They don't want to have to deal with 2 more years of escrow and things of that nature.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about why escrow exists, right?
Right.
Escrow exists to ensure that hockey-related revenue is a 50-50 split.
Right.
Because the players get paid throughout the year, and hockey-related revenue cannot be determined till after the season under the current CBA and what is considered hockey-related revenue, then the players have to put money in, because we already know, based on the salary payments, that they are over the 50% split. It's all there. Like that's so you put it in escrow. The escrow sits there.
Right.
And then depending on what happens with revenue, either some goes back to the owner, the players get some back. That's what no one talks about is, we put it into this. Well, did you get some back at the end of the year, or did you not?
They never, ever give the results. We almost never hear.
We don't know. So we don't know if they're getting it back. So let's take, we talked about this the other day, Jonathan Toews' comments. So he says, well, I know I signed a contract. That's what his quote says. I signed a contract and I don't think it's being honored, I think is the general gist of it. Well, you're representatives of the Players Association, which is a unionized entity and has a collective bargaining agreement with the employer, signed a contract too. So which one takes precedent, Jonathan? The point is, there's one way out of this, and that is changing the revenue split. And that's where this heads. If you don't like escrow, you have to change the revenue split, or you have to find a new solution of you hold it and you pay it back. So who's going to trust that guys are going to have an extra $600,000 at the end of the year to lump sum to pay back?
I think it's a twofold thing. So I think first question is, everybody talks about the hockey-related revenue in this, and I think that is a big deal only because it does change from year to year.
Yeah.
So first question is, what have the players done to drive up the hockey-related revenue? Why is it always all on the owners? Is that a fair question? I think it is.
Well, I think if you're a partnership and growing revenue, you need to take equal share in that initiative, and that's a discussion point. And Russ, to your point, if you want to change the share, then guess what's going to happen next is your battle lines are going to be drawn around what is hockey related revenue.
Right. So all right. So we get away from that. Okay. So now the second one is, let's say they come up, the players say, we don't want escrow anymore. And we're hearing that. We're hearing the murmurs. All that's going to do is create a flat cap situation that eventually there'll be a year where the cap doesn't go up. And there might be multiple years when the cap doesn't go up. And it could be starting next year. And so that's what you're possibly looking at if you get rid of escrow. At least with escrow, there's the potential of you getting more out of it. You still might not. But if you do away with it, what do you really think the chances are that you're going to get a higher cap and it's going to help all the players? I think less. I think that's a lot less. I don't know what you think, Peter.
Well,
go ahead, Mike.
This is what Pierre LeBrun just posted on The Athletic. If the players decide to reopen in 2020, it means 12 tense months to figure it all out, or else the games are lost. If the players decide not to opt out, it means 3 more seasons under the current CBA and a more relaxed atmosphere to extend the CBA past that. So I think it would be looked upon as a goodwill gesture.
Mm-hmm.
And, I get that. But
isn't that what Major League Baseball did?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
at some point, we're going to get a curveball in this. And the curveball is probably going to come from Don Fair. I don't think it comes from the owners. I
agree. It will. Yeah,
it will. And it will be something, because I think Fair is a very, very savvy and smart guy.
He's a brilliant guy. He's made the players a lot of money.
He's going to link something else in that gives them some leverage. And I don't think Bettman knows about it. But I also think Gary Bettman is a very smart guy. Mm-hmm. And I think he is going to find another leverage point. And I think the leverage point is going to be around compensation for things like CTE. I think there's going to be some sort of ability to bring money on the table for players in their post-career to address health issues or something like that. Okay. And the leverage points are going to be around that. And then it's going to come back to things like the Olympics and stuff. There's going to be all these little other things that come in. Also, they can hammer out an agreement on the issue that will come back and bite them in the butt again. Hockey-related revenue and escrow. They'll make compensations on other things to keep that, and it won't really solve the underlying issue that's making the players happy. And that's where I think this goes.
Well, it's interesting.
Solve the business model, and then you can tweak the other things.
It's interesting that according to LeBrun's piece, that the PA has suggested an extension of 3 more years, so that would make it through 2025. But of course, the owners want longer than that because they want extended labor peace. The other interesting thing was, and I mentioned this a couple months ago, and I thought that this was the potential solution to the RFA situation, is that the owners want to get. And this is a change in their policy. The owners want salary arbitration right after ELCs because they don't want these players holding out. So at least, they get they get these players signed for 1 year. It's similar to baseball in terms of arbitration. After a certain amount of years, it could go year by year, arbitration until they get to be unrestricted free agents. It doesn't prevent them from signing long-term extensions, but it also prevents these players like Marner and Braden Point from sitting out for months on end. And that's not good for either side. It's not good for the player. It's not good for the teams. So I think that might be a solution, but there's probably going to be some give and take there to get that to happen.
Here's the worst part, okay? And you can hang this on the hat of the owners and the players. This is the time of year where, like, the NHL does their media tours. They were doing one in Europe, and they'll do one in New York City, and now this is what they're going to be talking about again.
Yeah.
Think about that, right, Peter? From a perspective of the public taking in quotes and trying to get fans excited about hockey and new fans and everything else, we're still going to be hearing about this same old situation.
Yeah.
Peter, do you have to drop off, or are you still good for?
I've got a few minutes here.
Okay. I just think it's not good for either side.
We'll take some questions in the chat in a few minutes. So if you posted them, just post them back on there and there again, and we'll answer you.
Russ, I totally agree, and I think what Gary and Don should really worry about is not talking about the numbers of who gets what, but how you make things equitable. So your goal is to make things. You got to change the language.
Yeah.
And stop being adversarial about this, because we've said it before.
I will say this. I don't think they're adversarial about it. I don't. Yeah. Well, right now they're not.
Right now they're not. But I mean, don't turn it into, well, we need to ensure that the owners are financially viable and stuff like that. Well, when you don't have to pay for your arenas and all these different things, like if I hear someone from the Calgary Flames come out and bitch and moan about making money with what they're asking that city to put up, it's going to shoot everyone in the foot. Like, right. You're killing your leverage.
Right.
So, if the Oilers come out and say with their arena deal, you can't say that stuff and then turn around and cry poor later.
Right.
You got those deals so you could be financially viable, because that's what you told your city councils and your provincial politicians. Don't come and say you're not viable now because you've already said it. So, that's what I'm saying. The messaging has to be really careful about. We recognize that each side has some concerns about where we're at and how this works. And we want to try and solve something so that people feel that both parties are feeling that their concerns are being met, and that the business solution to distribute money works fairly in both ways. I should be writing this stuff for them. There's your message, Gary and Don. But that's what needs to be said. How you talk away from this is different, but they both need a combined marketing plan, because we've said it before and we'll say it again. You go into another lockout, it's going to, there are people who will turn away. They'll be done with the league.
And I think, Peter, the league knows that. And I think the players know that. They know that they pushed a lot of people up to the edge in 2012 by sitting out the first 3 months. The sport has bounced back from that brink. But they go through it again after missing a complete season over a decade ago, and then missing a quarter or a third of the season in the last decade. They go through that again. I think people will say, screw this, and they'll start watching basketball or do something else. It's, they realize that they can't keep going to this. They have to maintain labor, get concessions, negotiate, but in the end, pull away from the brink, because it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Now, just touching on a couple things here. A lot of tryouts have been mentioned. We did our usual game during the summer of buyout PTO 1 year contract or nada. The Calgary Flames are definitely in the PTO game, because they've invited 5 players on PTOs. Earlier in the summer, Andrew McDonald. Yesterday, they announced Alex Grenier, Tobias Reeder, Zach Ronaldo, and Devontae Smith-Pelly. First of all, Ronaldo, and I would say probably another one, I think, have no chance. They probably did favors. But, Reeder and McDonald, I think, have a decent chance to make the Flames. What do you think of some of those names, Peter?
Yeah, I think so. Flames will be interesting. I mean, they certainly are going to need someone to step up on defense for them because of Valimaki. So they need something, and it appears they're not going to make a trade. But it's it's something that has to. Sorry, I can hear noise upstairs right now.
Yeah.
It's something that has to it has to make sense for them. I mean, good luck to Andrew McDonald, but maybe with the Flames defense and the first two pairs are deadly.
Mm-hmm.
Giordano and Brody and Hamonic and
Hanifin
are fantastic pairs. So if you can play Andrew McDonald underneath really well, it might work for them. Anyways, guys, I have to log off because something just is going on, but we'll talk to you later.
Right.
Sorry about that.
Sounds good, Peter. Other names that were just announced in the last day or so. Let me just go through them quickly here. Lance Boma with the LA Kings, Troy Brouwer with Florida. Let's see here. Stefan Noesen with Dallas. Alex Petrovic was a while back with the Bruins, but Adam McQuaid's is skating with the Bruins. Our own Ty Anderson said that don't read too much into that because now Drew Stafford with Minnesota and Scotty Upshaw. I think that was a while back with Dallas. I don't know about Stafford doesn't strike. I mean, he struggled to basically get a job in New Jersey the last few years.
He's a great guy, but he's done.
Yeah, I think Petrovic might have a chance with the Bruins because he's a right-hand shot. He's a physical defenseman, and you can't eliminate the concern about Carlo and McAvoy not being there.
No, I mean, and then what does that mean for Chara? You've almost got to carry 7 defensemen if you don't have those 2 guys. So I think Petrovic does have a great shot there. There were some interesting little signings here today. Mm-hmm. Carolina signed defenseman Roland McCune, who he does have a little bit of an offensive game. Now, it's an interesting contract because it's $700,000 NHL, 70 minors, 90 guaranteed. So at least if he's a guy that's going to get shuttled up and down, that's not a bad payday for him. So that's an interesting one. The only RFA left for Carolina is Sammy McElwain, that big guy that we liked last year that played a little bit. So good for them. I think that's actually pretty smart. It seems like if this report's right, that Vegas is close to re-signing Jimmy Schultz. He was a Hobey Baker finalist, a defenseman, and he's a pretty good defenseman. So college defenseman, college free agent, that kind of guy. And so I think there's a real good chance that they get that done. And if you think about it, that's an organization that does need to build back a little bit of defensive depth after losing Brandstrom. So, Jimmy Schultz is a 24-year-old that you got to believe at some point could fill in a little bit. He got 1 game in with Vegas. He had 1 point last year. So really good career, though, at St. Cloud. I mean, really, like I said, a Hobey finalist. So that's another guy who I think that's a smart move. We're seeing all the small moves happen now, Mike, but just none of the big ones.
Yeah, the other one that was yesterday was Nikolai Goldobin with Vancouver at $900,000 for a year. Now he hasn't panned out, I think, as much as people thought he was going to. I mean, last year, 27 points in 63 games with the Canucks, got an opportunity. It's a low risk because if he doesn't work out, they can bury him in Utica and not have it take any kind of cap hit. But I mean, giving him a one-way deal, and he's at he's 24 years old. I mean, they're not ruling out the possibility of him being a contributor.
Who was that again? It broke up.
Goldobin.
Yeah, no, he could contribute. I don't know how much, but I think there is something there. There's definitely some speed and skill there. So yeah, for $900K, I mean, why not? Bring it on.
Sure. All right, some questions in the chat. I'm just looking for one here. That was at the beginning. Then when I asked, there you go. Mike and Russ question from Andrew in the chat. Which team will be impacted the most if their RFA misses the start of the season? how does it affect next year's RFA's teams? Well, the next year's RFA class, I haven't looked at it to see if it's.
I'm not even worried about next year.
Yeah, it's so I don't know, but everybody seems to be following what the other is doing in this class, and there's 9 or 10 that are still at an impasse with their teams. I think the team that'll be most affected will be Calgary without Tkachuk, because they're not, Gaudreau and Monahan are great. They're not really significantly deep forward-wise. And Tkachuk, 70 points last year. I think Colorado can survive a little while without Rantanen. I think the Leafs can survive a little bit without Marner. Tkachuk's out for a long time. That's going to be tough.
No, I think that's fair. I'm going to go with the Boston Bruins. They just won't have the top pairing. They'll be devastated. And then I think the Flyers are next with Konechny and Provorov. That's your first or second line winger and your top pairing defenseman, your number one defenseman. Both those teams could be in for a real hurting. I mean, Marner's Marner, right? But the Leafs could sort of get by like they got by without Nylander last year. You're talking about the Bruins. All of a sudden, Chira's got to play top pairing again if these two guys aren't there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I just don't. There's not there. I think they're a very good team. They're going to have to rely on being much better defensively to win games early on, and that's
like dirty, greasy goals. They're going to have to be like the big bad Bruins almost, because I don't think they're going to have enough skill lines.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to need guys like Jankowski jumping up and giving up a lot more offense if they're going to. They're going to, I mean,
Pastrnak and that top line's great. And then, but they're gonna, I don't think someone like Trent Frederick will maybe make it, but maybe Studnicka makes it,
right?
And that could add a little offense. All that said, you're right. I think they're gonna have to rely on some play in front of the net and good defense. They'll get the goaltending, but if they don't have that top pairing, they're in trouble.
Right. Dan says, will Ben Harper make the Leafs, or is he a Marley guy? Well, if it was up to me, he's a Marley guy. But we're talking about Babcock, who loves big defensemen, and maybe he keeps Harper around as the seventh. I can't see Harper. First of all, the top four is pretty much a lock. It sounds like Riley's going to play with Cody Ceci, and then they're going to partner Muzzin and Tyson Berry on the second pairing. Yeah. Third pairing, Dermott is out until probably November at the earliest. And that means the hodgepodge of Harper and Marinson and Hall and.
I mean, Marinson's better than Harper.
Yeah, Jordan. I think Jordan Schmaltz is going to make it.
Yeah, I think he'll have an excellent chance of making it.
Yeah, but it's a question of whether the Leafs want to go the way of promoting Rasmus Sandin, their first-round pick from 2018, or Timothy Liljegren, their pick from 2017, into the NHL at the very beginning of the season. Usually what they do is they let them play down in the American Hockey League for a couple months and sort of get into the swing of things and then bring them up middle of the year. They did that with Dermott. They were going to do it with Liljegren last year, and he got hurt. And early in the season, you can get away with a bottom pairing that is not great. So they probably are going to go with veterans. Unfortunately, and I'll be up at the Scotiabank Arena for a number of Leaf games. Leaf fans will have to be subject to watching Martin Marincin give away the puck every single night.
Well, he hasn't a giveaway every game, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean that's been his trend. Okay, Joe asks Mike, what do you think of the cap relief for teams on their drafted players? I think I'm in favor of a Larry Bird exemption in the league, where one player is exempt from being his contract being on the cap, or at least a discount. But I don't know whether the NHL, because the NHL is not interested in that for one reason. It only benefits the big market teams.
Right, it really does. I mean, you're talking about 5-6 teams that would benefit from that. And maybe then you would get a little bit of a dynasty thing going, but I don't think it helps the league.
Right. I mean, say it's Toronto, and say you can exempt one player. Okay, they exempt Austin Matthews. You just gave the Leafs $11 million extra to spend.
Right.
Now, if they want to spend that, if you put if you institute that along with a luxury tax where those teams, they're able to spend more on salary, but also they're kicking it in to the rest of the league to divvy up amongst other teams, then you might. But I don't see, the thing is, I don't think Toronto or New York or Philadelphia want to do that. I mean, they want to spend, but they only want to spend on money on their own players. They don't think they should have to fund Carolina or fund Buffalo or fund other teams.
No, sure.
Let's see here. Any more questions? From Joe, Mike, Russ, what do you think that in the next CBA cap relief for oh, you already asked that. I'm sorry. Right? That's the same.
That sounds familiar, Joe.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. Toronto Greenhouse. Young guys will get a chance following the season when Babs is gone after another first-round exit to Boston. That's Mr. Optimism there, Toronto Greenhouse. Well, let's just say this. If they lose in the first round again, I think Babcock is fired. There's been some talk about how Babcock is on tenuous ground, and Dubas has gone out of his way in interviews in the last couple of days to say that's not the case. I'm not saying he's lying. I'm just saying I think he's getting the full season, and if they don't have progress, then I think he's in trouble. It does the Leafs no good to say, "Oh, he's in trouble," because then everybody's.
I agree, but right. I think if he were to get a first round exit, they would be in trouble and would consider firing him. If they did, then I think what would happen is you probably see, and some of this may happen this year, but if it doesn't, you would definitely see Bracco, Liljegren, Sandin all graduate for playing for the new coach that knows them. That would be the logical step, and I think that would be the best way to sell to the fans. Hey, you know what? We've tried these other ways. We're not going to do it within. It would be a good marketing plan, actually.
The next coach of the Leafs is not in question. The next coach will be Sheldon Keefe, whether it will be next year or 3 years down the line.
And you'll see him bring up his guys, and I could just see those guys coming up, seamless transition. Let's add a little youth, a little speed. It would be a good move. And
I got a little heat on my I've been doing prospects columns for the Leafs over the last few weeks, and I had Jeremy Bracco ranked second. And my assertion, because somebody had a problem with it, I was like, okay, the guy was second in the American Hockey League in scoring with 79 points. With any other team in this league, Jeremy Bracco would be in the top 9 this year after that year in the American Hockey League. But because the Leafs have Marner, Nylander, and Kapanen as their top 3 right wingers, it makes no sense to put Jeremy Bracco in a fourth line role, and they're deep at right wing. So he either becomes trade bait, or if they trade one of those players, one of those players holds out or is in a contract impasse, it might give Bracco an opportunity. He's only 22 years old, so it doesn't do anything.
I like Bracco around with the kind of skill level he has. I don't think people appreciate the skill level he has, but if you see him play with better players like I have, you'll appreciate it a little more.
Yep. All right. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.